Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Cost Accounting class. Let me introduce myself. My name is Brenda, and today I will deliver the materials about activity-based costing or ABC. So there are two problems that we are going to do today, and we will start with the first problem. Parker Company produces mathematical and financial calculators and operates at capacity. Data related to the two products are presented here: annual production in units, direct material, direct manufacturing labor hours, direct manufacturing labor costs, machine hours, number of production run, and inspection hours. And the total manufacturing overhead costs are as follows: machining costs, setup costs, inspection costs. The instructions are: choose a cost driver for each overhead cost pool and calculate the manufacturing overhead cost per unit for each product. Compute the manufacturing cost per unit for each product. So for the first part, we are asked to determine the rates for each overhead cost. The first one is for the machining cost with a total cost of 375,000. And we have to determine the most relevant cost driver for this one. And if we see at the available data, of course, the most appropriate driver is the machine hours. And for the setup cost, the most appropriate driver is number of production run. And the inspection, the most appropriate driver is inspection hours. Given that information, we can count or calculate the rate for each overhead cost. So, for example, for the machining 375, the number of cost driver or the number of machine hours is 75,000. And the cost rate is calculate the total cost divided by the cost driver, which is 375 divided by 75,000. So we got the rate of $5 per machine hour. And for the setup cost, it is $120,000 divided by 100 production run. So we got the cost rate of $1,200 per production run. And the last one, inspection hours, 105,000. Divide that by 1,500 inspection hour, and we will get a rate of $70 per hour. Given that rate, we can calculate the number or the amount of overhead cost that is allocated to each of the product, which in this case is mathematical calculator, and the second one is financial. Starting from the mathematical products, we sum up all of the overhead costs, which consists of machining costs, and you have to calculate it by the cost rate times the number of the cost driver. In this case, it's 5 times the machine hour, and we can see the machine hour is 25,000 given in the problem. And then for the setup cost, the same thing. We have to calculate by 1,200 times 50, which is the cost driver, the production run. And for the inspection, it is $70 times 1,000. So by doing that, we can get the total overhead cost for mathematical calculators. And then to arrive at the cost per unit, we have to divide that by the number of unit produced, which in this case is 50,000 products. It is already also given in the problem. And we do the same thing for the financials. We can arrive at the total overhead cost of $345,000 and then divided by the unit produced, and we get the overhead cost per unit of $3.45 per unit. And then for the second problem, which is computing the manufacturing cost per unit, we can sum up the three components of a total cost, which is direct materials cost, direct manufacturing labor cost, and the overhead cost. And for the direct materials, it is also already given in the problem, $150,000 from here. And then for the direct manufacturing labor, we can get the number from here, 50,000. And for the overhead cost, we can get from our previous calculations, which is 255,000. And we sum up all of the components, we arrive at a total cost of 455,000. We divide by the number of units to arrive at the total cost per unit. So it's 455,000 divided by 50,000 units. And we do the same thing for the financials. So we get the total cost of 745. So we can get the total cost per unit of 7.45. So that's it for the first problem. Mainly we have to find the overhead cost per unit and also calculate the total cost per unit. Moving on to the second questions. So in this problem, Marshall's Devices uses activity-based costing to allocate overhead cost to customer order for pricing purposes. Many customer orders are won through competitive bidding. Direct material and direct manufacturing labor costs are traced directly to each order. Marshall's Devices' direct manufacturing labor rate is $25 per hour. The company reports the following yearly overhead costs. So there are several kinds of overhead costs, which are wages, depreciation, rate, rent, other overhead, and it's also provide the total overhead cost. And then Marshall's Devices has established 4 activity cost pools, which are direct manufacturing labor support, order processing, design support, and other. And for each of the cost pool, it determines the relevant activity measure and also the budgeted activity. For example, for the direct manufacturing labor support, the relevant measurement is the number of direct manufacturing labor hours. And in a year, Marshall plans to use 32,000 direct manufacturing labor hours. Moving on, some customer orders require more complex designs, while others need simple designs. Marshall estimates that it will do 100 complex designs during a year, which will each take 13 hours for a total of 1,300 design hours. It estimates it will do 150 simple designs, which will take 8 hours for a total of 1,200 design hours. Paul Napoli, Marshall's Devices controller, has prepared the following estimates for distribution of the overhead costs across the 4 activity cost pools. So for each of the cost pool, it allocates the wages, depreciation, rent, and other. So you can see the total here is of course have to be 100% because it's allocate all of the cost to each of the cost pool. And then order 277-100 consists of 6 different metal products. 4 products require a complex design and 2 require a simple design. Order requires 5,500 of direct materials and 100 direct manufacturing labor hours. And the first problem is allocate the overhead cost to each activity cost pool. Calculate the activity rate for each pool. And in the second one, we have to find the cost of order 277-100. So given that information, we can start from the first question, which is allocating the overhead cost to each of the cost pool. So the idea is, in this problem, it is already stated the percentage of how many of each of the overhead costs will be allocated to each of the cost pool. For example, the wages and salaries, 35% of it will be allocated to DML support, 30% will be allocated to order processing, 25% for design support, and the rest will be allocated to the other costs. And given that information, we can find the amount in dollars for each of the cost pool. So for the first cost pool, which is DML support, we can calculate it by summing up all of the overhead components. For example, for the wages and salaries, 35% times the wages and salaries, which is $600,000. And then for the depreciation, 20% of the total depreciation, which is $72,000 already given in the problem statement. And then the rent, 25,000 times 128,000. And for the other, it's 25% times